Yeah, so let me call to order a special meeting, the Personnel Committee to order. And today is Friday, September 3rd, 2021. And if we could have roll call of our committee
Director Rica,
here.
Director Combs,
Here.
And our next item is approval of the agenda. Yes, well.
I move.
Moving second, yeah. Moving second, and those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, I guess we can do that now too, so.
yes.
And then for any public comment, first just on any topic, not on the agenda, and then we can also open it up later for the items on the agenda. But do we have any requests for general public comment?
I have not received any requests for public comment.
Okay. All right. Okay, well then we'll get into the regular business. So just a quick background, I think as we finished this past evaluation and we made an amendment to the contract, and so kind of looking forward to this next year, we wanted to discuss and sort of finalize both I think probably the criteria is the one that's more, that was missing more from last year. The process and the timing are probably easier to deal with. And well, then part B, I think part B would flow from whatever we decide in A. So I think part A is probably the main topic today, I would say, although we can talk on the other one. So what I thought, we don't have anything, specifically written at this point. So I think between, Margaret and Miko, if you could keep track of what we decide, and so we could have a quick little summary, come back to the committee for review and then finalizing it. And I thought I would start with what I think is the easiest part, and that's the timing. When we do the evaluation and kind of work backwards. So I think the discussion we had landed, and the board was, I think, okay, and Margaret was okay that we could do the evaluation, finalize the performance evaluation in May, or it could be April. I think maybe that's what so any thoughts on that, Drew, Margaret? Should we put that we finish it?
It just needs to be done, I think, in plenty of time so the board has sufficient time to consider the implications of any changes to not only executive compensation, but to staff as well in the budget process. So April works great.
That's what I'm saying, April or May. Yep. I mean, March seems too early to me, but yeah. I think April or May.
That seems right. Drew, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, supportive.
Yeah. Shall we settle on just saying April, just to push us, or?
It always gives you a little bit of wiggle room. If we aim for April and something blows up our schedule, we have time in May.
Okay. All right. Well, let's say April then. So again, I think for now we can put these things down and then we can finalize them. So with the board, I think the board will be, okay, so April. So let's just say, by April meeting, we will, or by April, we might end up with a special meeting or whatever, but April, we finalized the performance evaluation.
If I can just say, from a budget standpoint, I totally support April. That makes it a lot easier for staff as we're developing the final draft budget to present. So April is good on this side of things.
So then let's say that March, just kind of working backwards, trying to think of what happened. So March, the the director submits a self-assessment or self-evaluation or report on, yeah, I guess a self-evaluation, right? Is that what it's called?
Sure,
So is that, we'll say March.
that sounds right.
And then kind of connected. Yeah, so I think that's all we need for timing, right? When, because the director submits self-evaluation, then the board.
Then
Finalize
maybe
it
the
together.
does the personnel committee want to review that in March and then bring forward to the board their recommendation in April?
You know, I think it's okay that self-evaluation goes to the entire board, because then the board, if we connect it to the process, well, my opinion is I don't think the personnel committee needs to make a recommendation. I think 5 board members get the self-evaluation of the director, and then they individually submit their evaluation, which is, that will get to the criteria. And so let's say in March, we all get self-evaluation. Between March and April, we submit our individual evaluation. And so that gets a little bit into the process. And, you know, traditionally it's been submitted to the chair or the personnel committee. So I think that's where that is submitted to the personnel committee, but mostly to summarize, not to do anything other than we're just taking what each board member is taking in, and then we make a summary of that and present it back to the board. I mean, that's sort of what I'm recollecting over the years, that neither the chair nor the personnel committee did anything other than summarize, not interpret or not select or not do any of those.
So you, as the personnel committee, aggregate your board colleagues' comments.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm just suggesting, I'm just kind of reviewing, you know, back in my mind what we've done over the years, but I'm trying to remember that. So again, let's say March, we get the self-evaluation of the director, and then we have the little instrument. Each board member submits that to the personnel committee. The personnel committee makes a little summary of that. And then when the board gets together, we all review that. And that's when then the board can highlight some things or, you know, finalize the summary in however way the board feels or whatever the majority feels or stuff. Drew, any thoughts on that? I'm just trying to think of the sequence and.
Yeah, I mean, that works for me. You know, in recent history, yeah, the personnel committee hasn't acted as much of a filter. Sorry for the background noise. With regards to this review, obviously there hasn't been many since I've been on the board, but it is more just sort of setting up the framework. But that it's mostly direct engagement between the executive director and all board members.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
if I could just chime in real quick. If we're saying executive director sends the self-eval to the
in
board
March,
in
to
March,
everybody.
right?
Yeah.
Then the board is going to respond. They're going to look at that. They're going to come up with their comments. But what we need to do now is determine how much time are we giving board members to respond, so that by the May meeting, we have everything in place.
Yeah, basically a month. You know, I mean, I think what's happened is, let's say we get it in March, then there's a month so that by the time we meet in April, we already have everybody's comments. And, you know, we just have to keep each other, you have to keep track of each other. I mean, in the past, sometimes there's been any one of us would finalize our comments that same meeting when 4 other people had done it, and, you know, we just added or whatever. So, I mean, doing this ahead of time, I think puts puts, make sure that the responsibility of each board member is the minute that they get the self-evaluation of the executive director, then, you know, that serves as a reference, but it's independent of the, whatever we come out with the criteria that the board fills out and sends them to, forwards them to the personnel committee. So, I mean, we could be specific and say, you know, make sure it's in the hands of the personnel committee at least a week before the regular meeting, so we have a chance. So personnel committee has a chance to kind of, you know, take a jab at a little summary or something, I would say.
Okay, that's great. I think that's very helpful.
And so just so I'm understanding, like, so the personnel committee summarizes the collective,
Yeah.
you know, feedback or assessment of the board. And are we having then a discussion in closed session about this, or is this something then that goes to a regular meeting? I'm just trying to, you know, understand when there is a closed session discussion, obviously because it's a personnel matter, and what is a regular session discussion or item.
Yeah. This is, you're saying of the whole board or the personnel committee? I guess.
I'm saying like the whole board.
Yeah.
When does this get taken up as a discussion by the whole board in closed session?
Well, you know, again, you know, just as recollecting over the years, I think we have tended to do it as part of the regular meeting, with just leaving more time, rather than creating another meeting just for that. That's what I kind of remember, but I think that'll be up to us. Maybe that's probably something we can take up with the board specifically to say, look, we could either have a longer meeting in April, or we set up a, like you say, maybe a special meeting in closed session. Yeah, it is closed session.
Yeah, in my experience, Chair Abrika, it's the directors meet in closed session to discuss the outcome of their summary of their performance evaluation, usually with the executive director, at least to provide their feedback. If there is a discussion about any changes in compensation, that may or may not be with the director in the room. The decision that the board makes in closed session about compensation is a reportable action in open session, but not the details of the personnel committee's performance evaluation.
Yes. So one variation, and I can tell you because, you know, we've been in many of these, is that when we have the summary of the collective comments, we do have an opportunity for only the board to discuss all of that. And then we call in the executive director. So, you know, there is that step, and it'll be up to the board to decide. But with the JPA, I think it's always been like that. We first have a discussion among ourselves, and then we call in the executive director, and usually the chair makes a summary, but, you know, everybody can jump in. And then, yes, you know, then we can deal with the any amendments to the contract after concluding that. But yeah, so it's it's all in closed session. It could be part of the meeting in April, or we set up a special meeting, I guess. You know, Drew, is that what you were kind of getting at?
Yeah, just making sure. Like, yeah, my understanding is that personnel discussions are usually in closed session. Even even of just the performance variety, even before you get to the point of any sort of contract amendments or compensation changes. Yeah. And so I just wanted to make sure, understanding like what then was for you like the regular session. Like, do you see anything happening in a regular session? Because you had mentioned that, and I just wasn't clear what that would be, other than the report out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, we don't put the evaluation in closed session. It's only anything that comes out of it in terms of modifying the contract, whether it's compensation or anything else. That is what comes back in open session.
Okay, I think
Yeah,
we're aligned. Yeah.
So. Okay, so I think the timeline, maybe the timeline and the process part is, we cover the main points, I think, or at least And, and we could look at this back so that we can then at some point present that to the board and say, this is what we've come up with, I guess.
Mhm.
It makes
And Miko and I can combine our notes, and I think it might be helpful to put this in a little block flow diagram so that, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, we'll draw some pictures and help put this in a
So,
flow table or something.
yeah, and it would be like, this is our recommendation from the personnel committee.
Mhm.
Okay, if we now move to the criteria, so I think this is the part that probably needs a little time. We may not be able to finish it today, but so definitely I know that, we had received, even as a result of this past evaluation, I think, Margaret, you prepared a very comprehensive sort of objectives, performance objectives, and sort of had a mixture of things. Some are project oriented, et cetera. So definitely the direction from the board really is that the criteria, we really want to separate that more. The how is not, it's not as much what is expected in terms of getting things done per se, but how they're done. I think that was the word that came out in our meeting, I think, how. So then, and actually I was gonna ask Miko, I think somewhere we have records. I just couldn't find my file. I have a little box where I kept things. I can't find the instrument that we used with the previous director. It was really the only one we used over the years. It was very simple. It had 4 categories. So I'm just going by memory now, but I'll find it in this next week. I'm determined. It had like 4 categories. One was communication. And then under that, there was like communication with, with the agencies, communication with the staff, communication with the board, and then the community or something, right? And that. Then another one was management and supervision. So it had something on that. And then finance, budgeting and finances. And then there was one more, which I really can't remember. And under each of those, criteria, there was some individual sort of, like the one I mentioned with communication. We're looking at the communication between kind of those 4 entities, if you will. Communication with the board, with the community, with the agencies, with the staff. That was it. And yeah, so I'm pretty sure there was 4. And it did offer an opportunity for rating, but primarily was for comments. So it was really 1 page, and people wrote in each box, if you will, some highlights, and there were both things that were working or areas that needed improvement or an example or something. And they really became kind of draft documents that then, that's where then the discussion took place, and then a final summary was made. Now, I did find, and I just found it late last night, I just sent a picture, so I don't have, I sent it just to Drew and Margaret this morning on your cell number. I sent you a picture. I took a picture of the one that is used by BASCWA. Is the water conservation. I used to be on that board, and I just happened to find that one. And, it has, that one has only 2 big categories. One is leadership objectives, and then management objectives. And then under leadership, it's got like 4 or 5 subcategories, and management has got like 4. In any event, whatever we land on, I think that's what the board is interested in, is a few major categories with some subcategories that can be used as a guide. And then people can comment on them, add things, examples. So it really makes it easier rather than, but anyway, any comments on, I think that's the one we need to construct something that hopefully is not too complicated, but captures our relationship, you might say. Yeah, Drew, what?
Yeah, I was gonna say, the BOSCA sort of framework that you sent, I mean, that works fine. I mean, you know, obviously we can tweak it
exactly.
as needed, or if you find that the one that's been used by the JPA in the past,
right.
I think that will work fine. But when you said it's not just the what, it's the how, that has reminded me of something that I have seen as a sort of an absent part of this process, at least as long as I've been involved in the JPA, and that is the upward feedback from staff. I would like to see a way in which we can implement that in, and so we're getting those data points, especially because you know it's really the staff that works with the executive director far more closely and far more extensively than we do. And in these past, the last sort of review for Lynn that I participated with, and then the one with Margaret, of course, there was changeover, and then there was like sort of other priorities that the organization was in transition. So it's not surprising that we missed that part, but it was something I noted that is a data point I would very much like to have. And so how we build that into the process, do we give, you know, the Margaret's reports, the staff of the JPA, essentially this document or some version of it that they also then can submit to the personnel committee? I don't know, but I do think that's going to be an important data point to have, especially as you pointed out, Ruben, in trying to suss out that how things are being accomplished.
Right. Yeah. So I think that one we do need to take back to the board, I think, and decide. I'm just thinking because you're right, like in East Palo Alto this past year, just as an example, last year we talked about that, like, you know, we should do I guess they call it 360 or a modified 360. That was a new word for me, modified 360, where you get, you know, you go around and get other input from the staff, not necessarily. Well, for us in the city, it was really the cabinet level people, you know, not everybody, but I guess ultimately you could do that too. And so this year we did do that. We're doing that with the city attorney now. We did it with the city manager, where we got that. And we got a facilitator to do that. So I don't know if that was more just because it is a lot more work. We're a small agency, so I don't know how. We probably have to check with council how we handle that, I guess, or, you know.
Yeah, I wasn't looking at some big production or process. I was just looking at a form that, yeah, or even like, you know, it could be a conversation between the personnel committee and staff members.
Right.
Again, very informal, but I mean, to your point, Ruben, whatever, we certainly, there are rules. We're operating in a regulatory heavy environment. So yeah, whatever are the rules we should follow, we should certainly follow. But if it does seem like it is going to need to be a production because of the rules we have to follow, then maybe we should reconsider it.
Yeah.
So
and then we do it in agreement with the director. Obviously, the executive director would have to agree to it too. Well, at least that's why we did it in the city so far. Yeah.
Last year, I did ask for staff's input, and I did not share that with the board. It was more for my benefit. If staff is amenable to my sharing with the personnel committee and the board their previous feedback, I'm happy to do that.
So, well, I don't know. I think that might be a little different. If the board is asked, I don't know, you know, like I said, this is the first time we've done it in the city, and it was done by a facilitator, but it didn't go through the city manager, for example. It didn't go through them. They understood that this was being done for the city council. See what I mean? It was being done for the city council, so it had a slightly different perspective in a way, maybe.
Yep.
So if I could just chime in for a second, this has become common practice across the board for all agencies, not just the government agencies, in terms of getting 360 feedback. It's something that can be easily implemented for an agency our size. And it's a simple matter of the personnel committee can go ahead and draft a document to send to us. It's only 3 of us, and you know, just have us respond by a certain date. One of the things that has been an issue with the JPA in the time that I've been here, which is a number of years now, is the fact that We have not, as you know, the reason why we're having this meeting is that we have not kept accurate records of a process for the executive director review. And we don't have any files here from any reviews for Lynn. So we have nothing to compare to. Anything that the board did, the individual board members who run the personnel committee had those files. So as we're talking process, we also need to remember there are some law logistics that we need to keep in mind. Those records need to be secured and locked away somewhere, but we need to make sure there's a process so that after the board does this review, those records are kept in the JPA files somewhere. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, I let you guys know that is something that is lacking. We had them from our first executive director, Cynthia, but there's nothing here in the records for any of Lynn's reviews. I can't speak for everyone in staff, but when Margaret did send us the upward review for her last year, I know that I felt that I appreciated that because that was the first time we were asked feedback. And it is important that that does happen. I mean, we know that unofficially the board does give their feedback about each of the individual staff positions for each of us. So we appreciated being able to share our responses. As far as I know, just talking to my coworkers, I think that is something that the board should consider. And it won't be hard for an agency our size to go ahead and add this in. And we could use what Margaret sent last year as a template.
So, yeah, so I think one on this particular issue, I think we do need to report to the board and the board will decide, you know, again, I'm just saying that, you know, it'll be up to the board to say, yeah, let's do a 360 or no, let's just keep it, you know, that. So that's number one. And then number two, I think if the board agrees to that, then it would be something that would come directly from the board to the employees and return back to the personnel committee, not going through the city. I mean, the city, you know, city manager, JPA, you know, director. Now, that could still happen. Like you said, you appreciated that the director was asking. And so that still could happen, but this would be different. Right.
No, that's completely understood. You know, the board would be directing this process. I just, if we're going to suggest it, it'd be nice to have it in an outline for you guys to take back to the board in your next, you know, session and in the process. Just, you know, personnel committee discuss this and would like to present to the board, you know, possible 360, just going.
Oh, yeah, right. So yeah, we'll make a report of all these points because yeah,
Yes.
we'll get that final agreement from the board on the timing and the process, including potentially use 360, and then also even the criteria, what
Yes.
it is that we're going to use, you know.
And I would ask that the 360 review not only ask staff's input, but ask other community members and agency points of contact as well. So internal and external colleagues.
Okay, yeah, like I said, you know, I learned this word. I had heard it before, but it's like, so we did a modified 360. So I guess it's like, what does 360 mean?
That means you know, review from above, review from below, and review from all sides.
I know, but you know,
So,
how extensive? How
yeah,
extensive?
Yeah,
right?
how
So
big do you draw the circle? I would like input from every single one of our agency members with whom I engage on a regular basis. I would like input from community members with whom we engage on a regular basis. So we could probably draw a circle
Well,
around
so I think,
that.
you know, as we report to the board, I think we can have little bullet points because it will be up to the board how extensive they want to do this. You know, in other words, yeah, the
Yeah,
staff.
how many pages of review do you want to
Yeah, no,
summarize?
exactly, right. So, and then even community members, you know, how are you going to select them? You're going to do, anyway, but I think extending it seems like will be, as Drew was mentioning, you know, extending it at least to the staff, but, and then it could be, as you're suggesting, you know, other point persons and agencies, maybe even community members, you know, et cetera. So I mean, I think that'll be a good discussion for the board to have to land on, you know, how extensive. the 360 is.
And the board may also want to consider how frequently they want to do a 360 review. Is it annually? Is
I
it
would say,
every other year? Is it every second year?
oh, I see. Yeah, right. Well, I think for now, we're at least planning for next year.
Okay.
If it happens, because we've never done it before. I think after that experience, then, the board may, I mean, yeah, and yeah, I mean, that would be my guess right now, whatever we do, we're trying it out and see how it works.
Is this a point where I could jump in just for a minute?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this feels fairly informal, even though
Oh,
it's
it is. Yeah.
it's a real formal meeting. So I've been doing executive director reviews for the past probably 25 years, all in nonprofits, of course, which is a different animal, but there are some similarities. And pretty much we've settled on annually, we reach out to staff with a very short, we basically ask about 4 or 5 very general questions, and it's optional whether they answer or not. And we found it to be very useful. And of course, it goes directly to the personnel committee. It does not, because it's an opportunity to share issues maybe that have come up that are a little sticky. Yeah, and to go to the board, essentially you're going to the board for some feedback and some help in a way with the staff. The larger one that Margaret was talking about, we tend to do those maybe every 3 years, where we reach out. Essentially, we usually reach out to donors or other nonprofits that we work with. I'm talking right now about grassroots ecology, but I do it in other things, because that is a lot of work to reach out to other people.
Mhm.
Quite honestly, you don't get the same attention and feedback that you would from staff, because those people are only sort of tangentially engaged. They got 96 other things going on besides talking about how Margaret would be doing, so but every once in a while you get some really good feedback from there, but I wouldn't do that very often. You wear out people, quite honestly, but staff is usually very receptive. And oftentimes they bring up with, one of our things we ask about is about not directly about the executive director, but more about the organization in itself and some improvements that could happen that the executive director could put in place. So I would strongly suggest you do that. And I'd be happy to share our little questionnaire, but although, again, you're working in a very different environment where we have certain rules and regulations. In the public sector, I'm sure there are a lot more when it comes to personnel stuff. So, but I'd be happy to do, send Margaret or you or whoever, Ruben, whatever you'd like to know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the input there. Great. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So in terms of the criteria, like I said, I will get my hands on this sheet, but I'm pretty certain of those 3 categories are mentioned, broad categories, right? But they had subcategories: communication, and then budgeting and finance, management and supervision, and I don't know what the other one. And maybe it was, I'm pretty sure it was 4. Maybe it was just other. There's always an other category, whatever else you want to put in. And should we try looking at the one that Baswa uses? They didn't have stuff. Yeah, yeah, I don't know if it's worth going through each one of them right now, or should we take a
Ruben, if you like, when you find that example that you think you have, and you can put hands on it, send it to me. I'll combine the 2.
Yeah, maybe come up with a combined
and send it back to you guys as a
and then go from
here's
there.
A, B, and a combination that's C.
And then go from there. Yeah. Yeah, I think that would work rather than going through each one.
Okay.
And then, yeah. Okay.
That'll be my action item.
So I think that's really all the main points, right? I think we covered. And once we get a little draft back, we can then finalize or have a little report for the board.
Do you want that on the September agenda or October's?
We know, I mean, we could do it September, but I think if we do it in October, it's fine to make sure that everything is more together, you know.
Okay.
So we'll shoot for it's. Yeah, well, September's already rolling, huh?
Yeah, it's gonna be a long conversation, I think. So
Yeah, so I
October
think
seems
maybe
good.
October. I think maybe October. I think we're okay with timing, you know, right
Yeah,
now.
I
So-
think we've got plenty of time.
So October, let's just shoot for October, yeah. And then, you know, part B, I think we could hold off on that a little bit, but because whatever we come up with could be included in a board handbook.
Yeah.
Understanding that the board can always change, you know, I mean, the process and stuff. So it's not as set in stone as perhaps some things with employees. I don't know. So I don't want to, I don't know. But I mean, that's an easy one. It seems like if we choose to put it in there, like this is how the board conducts the performance evaluation, at least the general points, you know, I guess.
And to have the timing, the general points, an example template as a point of reference, just so that when there is board turnover, and if somebody new comes onto the personnel committee who has never had the experience of doing an executive review, they at least have some idea of how the process goes, the timing, the level of detail. That's the thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think we were very efficient, unless there's anything else. I think we early morning, I guess we gotta move on to other stuff.
Can I make two more quick comments here?
Sure.
As to B, I'm sure you're absolutely right, Ruben. I think you said the board things change, and that can be easily done if you in a board handbook. You know, it's not a real official. The employee handbook's probably a little bit more. Needs to be a little bit more technical, but if you're just explaining something rather than requiring something, I think that's, I really like that idea. So any board member coming on automatically has somewhere to go to know what they're being asked to do. And there's some process and guidance in there. And we do that in the nonprofit world all the time. The one other thing I just wanted to say in terms of criteria is something that I don't know exactly how you would include it, but I'll just use the term culture. You know, I feel like the executive director in an organization is responsible for the culture of the organization and how inclusive it is, and really it's kind of touchy-feely too in a way, making sure that everything's going smoothly and people feel included. Of course, it's become very popular in the last few years, but it's always that you're creating a culture. And I think that's something that's kind of overlooked often, but very important to call out.
Right. Yeah.
Or tone, or I don't know what word you want.
Yeah, some words. Yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Being more explicit on that. I think in the past it was kind of in between things, but being more explicit. Yeah.
So thank you for letting me make some comments.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for your comments, man. Okay. Okay, so Margaret, so I'll find that form forwarded, and then I think between you and Miko, you could send a brief little summary to Drew and I about what we talked about today, and then we have time, but we can review it and have a little report for October back to the board. Yeah.
That sounds great.
Sounds great. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of Friday and have a good weekend. Oh, Labor Day. So Labor Day too, huh?
Long weekend. Enjoy a long weekend.
Enjoy the long weekend.
Yeah. More time for
Yeah.
More time for playing with this guy. Drew, you have kids. I have a puppy.
Oh, there you go. All right.
All
Okay.
right. Thanks,
See you later.
everyone.
Bye.
Good to see y'all.
Good to see you.